Thank you, Vicki. Thank you all very much for being out here today. It is remarkable that we are close to celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake. I will not forget, as many of you, I'm sure, will not forget that moment. I was down in the Marina District, 15 Rico Way, walking out of my mother's apartment, about to go see the game, hurried because I was late. At 5 o'clock, and I was just about to walk out the door when the chandelier started to move, and then it didn't stop, and I went and stepped back into the bathroom door, and I'll never forget the experience and the feeling of vulnerability and the intensity of that moment as I watched that chandelier literally go back and forth and get closer and closer to hitting the ceiling. No sooner did I do that than I remember hearing all of those car sirens going off. I walked outside and I thought all the sewers had started to burst, and realized only later that was that thing that seismologists and others had predicted called liquefaction that was taking shape. I then recall the smell of gas as I was down in the marina and people running in one direction, and I started walking and then running and had, I don't know why, but I had a video recorder that was in my car right outside, and I grabbed it, and I still to this moment have some pretty compelling and remarkable videos of that time as I watched those buildings on those corners literally just buckle at the knees, those vulnerable structures. And I will never forget, and this is an indelible moment as a sports fan, to be there in the marina, in the middle school, in the parking lot with thousands and thousands of others. Talk about the ultimate in sort of democratic reality, that regardless of your stature, regardless of being rich or poor, or in this case particularly famous, there was Joe DiMaggio among the throngs of people waiting in line as we all waited to find out in those coming days whether or not we get those green cards, I recall, red cards, and whether we can get back into our homes. I know with intimate appreciation many folks that snuck back into their homes before they got their cards. I won't tell you who, and I won't suggest that it was me. But nonetheless, I remember those moments, and folks literally hiding when they had some of the police officers coming by with the darkness just so that no one would know you actually were in your home searching around for things. So it's pretty indelible as a San Franciscan, that moment. And I, without being long-winded, I imagine all of you share similar stories of that moment and that sense of vulnerability and horror. Of course, we shared that with the world somewhat significantly as it was televised around the world, that World Series game. And now we have the opportunity to celebrate our renewal, our rebirth, and our reconstituted emergency delivery system. And I think that's really why this is not just a commemoration as much as it is a celebration of the spirit of our city, the spirit that defines us, and the spirit that, of course, brings us 100 years back to the 1906 earthquake, where that same spirit brought forth the great rebirth and renewal of the city as we know it today, including this remarkable structure that would not have been here had it not been for Mother Nature's original fury and the wisdom and the stewardship of not just the elected officials locally here at the time, but elected officials across the nation that recognized the iconic status of San Francisco to the United States of America and internationally. We have done a lot in the last few years to reconvene our disaster council. I think we've met on 24 occasions. They hadn't met in 8 years previous to that. We have updated our emergency operations plan. They hadn't been updated in at least a half a decade. We instituted some, I think, very innovative programs like 72hours.org, and I just want to remind people, 72hours.org. It's gotten a lot of national attention. It's won Webby Awards. It's been noticed as a best practice. Other states, not just cities, have copied our program, but 72hours.org provides the best place to get aggregated data about emergency planning, emergency preparedness, that focuses not just on what the city's doing, but focuses on what you can and should do at home. The best emergency plans are not at City Hall or at the Department of Emergency Management or the fire or police department and elsewhere. They're in your pocket or they're in your drawer, or they're, more importantly, indelible in your minds. The fact that you need to reconcile where your kids are. If there was a major quake right now, at this moment, where are your children? Your cell phones don't work. There's no communication. What do they do? What do you do? Do you have an emergency plan that you have in a place where you know is safe, that you're going to convene at a particular time after a major incident? If you're able to get one child because you have transportation, but the other child doesn't have transportation, what have you organized in terms of helping find that other child? What are you doing in terms of copying your insurance data? Did you just copy it and then put it in another drawer in the same house? Doesn't make sense. Or did you copy it and send it to your family members that live in another city, or even more importantly, another state? Did you actually put together a list so that when you go back home and you know you need to do something about that gas shutoff, and you just knew that you should have paid more attention, do you actually have a copy that can tell you how to do it so you feel you made the right decision and didn't make things worse, as I think I might have done in 1989 when I was fumbling around downstairs in the apartment building. So those are just briefly and loosely some of the things that we want people to be thinking about again. We are much better prepared than we were 20 years ago. But that preparedness only goes so far. The reason we call it 72hours.org is the likelihood that you'll be on your own for 72 hours if there's a major emergency and a major disaster in the city, man-made or because of the fury of Mother Nature. And so we want people to recognize you can't just count on the federal government, the state, or even your own local government, that it's your friends, your neighbors, it's yourself that will be the one most accountable and responsible for your safety and security. So in effort to raise awareness and to make real some of this rhetoric, we are organizing a series of events around the 20th anniversary. You see some of them highlighted around. I saw some other boards behind you in front of me. And Vicki Hennessy, who runs our Department of Emergency Management, will talk about that. We're pleased to have the Secretary of Matt, what's the official title? That's it, California Emergency Management Agency, the czar of statewide emergency preparedness here. And we have representative from FEMA as well that will all talk more specifically about how we're partnering. It's not just the city and its initiatives, but how we're piggybacking, Mr. Secretary, on your statewide initiatives on the 15th, and how we'll be doing some symposiums and panels, and how we'll have new material to distribute. We will be talking with people like Sheriff Hennessy and the work he has been doing, with Ed Lee and the work that he's doing with Daniel Holmesy in terms of our recovery efforts, and really highlighting that because we think that's a national model. The folks at the Department of Public Health that will also be participating in some of these panels and outreach. Of course, our police and fire chief who will be front and center in these discussions, and it's all about raising awareness. But no one will be more sensitive to this work than Michaela Alioto-Peer as a District 2 supervisor, because so much of the focus of that quake was down in the marina and the vulnerability of a lot of the landfill there south of Lombard Street. And I appreciate her leadership and stewardship of these efforts, and I want to thank her for her work, and also organizing a commemoration for the firefighters, which we also will be announcing and doing, because there were a lot of heroes that were born that day in 1989, some in uniform, many that were not. And so we're also going to be doing a monument in their stead, in their memory, and to extend their example. I also want to thank Supervisor Carmen Chu, because Carmen realized after we did a report, we call it the CAPS report at the Department of Building Inspection, that it's not just the marina that is the most vulnerable. Arguably, it's out on the Sunset in the avenues where a lot of those buildings are there, and they are not reinforced and they are not constructed as they should be, even at this moment. And I know that the supervisor has been working hard to make sure we fulfilled our promise to finish that survey, and has been working with us on these voluntary programs that we've just initiated at DBI Department of Building Inspection, and then working to get our mandatory program in place very shortly, which will make her very unpopular in some corners, but a hero in others. Right? You're still with us on that. This is called public leverage for legislation. There's a lot of work to do on the mandatory, but it's the right thing. So with that, let me, Mr. Secretary, I think you probably should have been kicking this off in terms of rank, but why don't you come up and why don't you chime in and share with us some of the work that you and the governor are doing and how we're partnering together. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for you taking the time to come down here. It means a lot to us.
Yeah. Well, thank you. The mayor has hit it right on the head. It is all about partnerships, and it's all about working together. And I want to thank you for the great leadership that you have shown, the partnerships that we have in working and making not only San Francisco, the Bay Area, California, and indeed the nation safer because of the cooperative work that we're doing together. I think many of us would be shocked, as the mayor was as well, when you stop to think that it's been 20 years since that earthquake. One of the things that I think that the public needs to know to understand what we are doing in government in terms of getting better prepared is the governor started an annual exercise program called Golden Guardian. He realized that, look, if you don't exercise, plan, and prepare ahead, test your equipment, test your abilities, see what you can do, we started that in 2004. In 2006, on the 100th anniversary of the 1906 quake, we worked with our federal, state, and local partners to recreate, through computer analysis and study, what kind of damage would that earthquake do 100 years later. And we learned a lot of lessons from it. We also know, and I think the public knows, when you look at a much smaller earthquake as devastating as the 1989 earthquake was 20 years ago, it was nothing compared to the big one. And the issue is that we know of the lessons to learn, that government's going to be overwhelmed, and there's things that we need to do to get better prepared, and we're doing it. When we think about the overwhelming destruction that could happen when the big one hits, and it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when. And the scientists tell us that a 7.8 earthquake is overdue in California. Either here in San Francisco or Los Angeles, we have many fault lines here in California. So we have no time to waste, and that's what I appreciate about your leadership in terms of putting together your entire leadership teams. We've done tabletop exercises, we did lessons learned, and what we did in the after action from that earthquake exercise was say, look, we have to get together and have a catastrophic plan for San Francisco, for the Bay Area, Northern California, and that's where we got together with our federal partners to work out sort of the concept of operations that we will do in any major incident, in all hazards incident. And so it's important, and why we're really here today, not only to look at next month that we're going to have the 20th anniversary of this. This is National Preparedness Month. And we want to send the message, and we've got our Red Cross folks here who are great volunteers who also get the message out, that look, the idea of who is and what is a first responder has changed. Prior to 9/11 and prior to Katrina, we often thought people like Chief Joanne Hayes White and her folks were the first responders, that fire, police. But after that, we thought, well, no, it's much more than that. It includes our public works. It includes our private sector. But you know what? We really have realized since then, and the lessons learned, is that we're all first responders. And if you think back 20 years ago, who were the first people who were pulling people out from underneath the highways? Who were rescuing people from their homes and workplaces? It was all of us. It was each of us. We're all first responders. And with that obligation as a first responder comes a responsibility. We know we have risks in California. All hazards, fire, flood, earthquake, chemical release, riot. So we need to be prepared. The Bay Area has the great 72hours.org, and so what we want people to do, and what we're asking today, we want you to be prepared for all hazards. Have the family communication plan. Think about these things. Practice evacuating from your home and where you will meet up outside. My father's been in the fire service for 57 years, and there is nothing more painful and tragic than a parent going back into a house thinking that they're going to rescue a child who has already come out of the house. You need to do those kind of planning ahead. At work, how are you going to evacuate and where will you go? This is the month to prepare. And what we're going to do with the mayor's leadership and the governor's leadership on this is we're going to exercise how well we have prepared for an earthquake next month. We took the lessons learned from the Northern California and the Bay Area and San Francisco in terms of the earthquake, and last year we recreated a 7.8 earthquake, did the computer modeling down in Los Angeles. And it ended up being the largest exercise and drill in the nation's history. We had 5.5 million people participating in that exercise and drill last November. We thought it was so important that we've decided to take it statewide. And we're going to do, and it's going to be, we're already up to 4.5 million people already signed up, the next biggest and best exercise in drill in the nation's history. Because we're going to take the Great Shakeout statewide. And so on October 15, at 10:15 a.m., we are going to exercise the idea of a 7.8 earthquake. You can go on to shakeout.org to learn and follow along as the earthquake and help you to get better prepared. So take Preparedness Month, take today to get ready, to get better prepared for all hazards, have that family communication plan, and then join us fulfilling your responsibility to be first responders, to help us when disaster happens so that we can focus on saving lives and property. I often say, those knowing the risk that we have, it is selfish and irresponsible not to prepare. Because if you don't prepare, if you don't have the 72 hours of food, water, and medicine, what that means, first of all, it's irresponsible that you haven't thought ahead about you and for your family and how you would take care of yourselves in an emergency. But it's selfish because if you're not hurt or injured and you didn't take the time to plan and prepare ahead and have that kind of ready kit, it means while we're overwhelmed and we're trying to save lives and property and contain the incident, we have to pull those emergency people off of saving lives and property to look after you because you didn't take the time to plan and prepare ahead. It's a responsibility that we all share to do it. And I hope that Preparedness Month, this event, and all the events that we're going to do next month in terms of exercising reminds us of our responsibility and that we get better prepared. And I want to just follow one other thing with the mayor's comments about the gas valve. There are many things, that don't cost a cent. It doesn't, and I hope you will do it today. Go home today, get off that couch, get away from the TV, and find where your gas meter is. Figure out how you're going to shut it off. And this is critical. The computer modeling studies that we did both here in San Francisco and, as you know, from 1906, it's not just the buildings falling down, it's the number of fires that can develop afterwards. 1,600 fires in Los Angeles. And our firefighters are going to have to try and fight that and get to those with broken highways and transportation and water systems that are broken. So your ability to help us, if instructed to shut off those gas valves, can save us from having those kind of fire conflagrations that could kill many more lives. So one thing you can do today, we appreciate it. And as the mayor said, and what I understand and what the governor understands is our mutual aid system, our partnerships are about building from the bottom up. And you have built a great system with your leadership and folks here. We know we have more to do. We hope that you'll support the governor's emergency response initiative so that we can fully fund our firefighters, bring a couple more fire engines for the mutual aid system here to San Francisco so that we can deal with all hazards. So it's about those partnerships. All incidents are local, building from the bottom up, sharing, all for one and one for all in terms of the great mutual aid system and partnerships we have. And then part of those partnerships is working very closely with the federal government. And Karen Arms has spent her career with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. She has been acting director here. She's the deputy director of FEMA for Region 9. She's been a great friend and partner in helping us with the catastrophic plan and helping us to respond to all of the incidents that unfortunately we get hit with too often here in California. So, Karen, come share some thoughts about our federal, state, and local partnership.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, Mayor Newsom. Thank you for including FEMA in today's event. On a personal level, it's an honor for me to represent FEMA at today's Big Rumble kickoff, consisting of a series of events that promise to be both reflective and forward-looking. In our agency, we're taught to lean forward in preparing for the next big challenge. But while we're committed to improving and looking forward, we certainly agree that taking time to remember the tragic events that struck the Bay Area nearly 20 years ago are important. In our business, earthquakes come under the benign-sounding category of no-notice events. But earthquake aftermath, as we all know, can be far from no notice. 20 years ago, I was at home in Alameda getting ready to watch the Oakland A's take on the San Francisco Giants, of course in the first and I think the last to date Cross Bay Area World Series. And in seconds we learned that that showdown wasn't to occur. Statistics tell part of the story of Loma Prieta. 63 people died. More than 2,000 were injured, and several thousands more lost their homes and their businesses to the fires that ignited after the quake. The graphic horror of the Nimitz Freeway failing and portions of the Bay Area Bay Bridge collapsing made many of us feel helpless, frustrated, and angry at nature's power. Billions of dollars were spent in recovery, and the psychological costs will probably never be told. Experts say the initial trembler only lasted 10 or 15 seconds, but for many of us, it was enough to create a lifetime of tragic memories. But one thing Loma Prieta's social aftershocks did not do was to render us powerless. In fact, as Americans usually do, we took the destruction as a challenge. Infrastructure was rebuilt and it was strengthened. Businesses reopened and new ones were started. And the Bay Area remains one of the most popular places in the country to live, study, visit, and work. We in government, both at the local level and at the national level, took a bitter lesson from Loma Prieta, and we went back to work. We were and remain determined to be prepared more than ever for the next earthquake or other challenge that man or nature may send our way. Approximately 1 year ago, FEMA and the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services completed a joint all-hazards plan to manage a disaster event in Northern California. We also created and tested a separate plan specifically to respond to a San Francisco Bay Area catastrophic earthquake based on the earthquake of 1906. Creating and testing these plans took more than a year of intense work with our state, local, federal agencies, as well as our colleagues in the private sector. Today, FEMA and the state of California are very proud of these integrated plans, and we're committed to constantly updating them and testing them. These plans have had a second welcome benefit. They now serve as a solid foundation for another response plan for a projected major earthquake on the southern San Andreas Fault down in Southern California. So while we pause today in what the President has declared as National Preparedness Month, I cannot emphasize too strongly, as my partners before me have, that emergency preparedness is the responsibility of all Americans. While it might be a while before we see a destructive event such as the Loma Prieta earthquake, disasters come in all sizes, all shapes, and all levels of danger that require us to be ready for anything, anytime. Preparedness planning, of course, starts with a discussion as basic as, what'll I do if my community is impacted? What will you and your family do? How will you communicate with your family and your loved ones? Part of such a plan requires that you're familiar with the roles of your local and state emergency first responders. Also, that you are self-sufficient in providing yourself and your loved ones the basic commodities, food, water, cash, and have a personal communication plan in place for a minimum of 72 hours. And speaking plainly, having such a plan will substantially reduce your risk to death or injury, as well as your risk to your family, your colleagues at work, your neighbors, your loved ones. We can't afford to have history repeat itself simply because we didn't do anything. I'll close with the commitment. FEMA is poised to support the City of San Francisco and the State of California in major emergencies. The Big Rumble is an enormously valuable vehicle for encouraging San Franciscans and all Bay Area residences and businesses to plan now. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Sheriff Michael Hennessy to the podium for a few remarks. Sheriff Michael Hennessy has the distinction, I believe, of being the longest-lived, oldest, he says, local elected official. 30 years, Sheriff? 30 years, Sheriff Hennessy.
Thank you. Well, I was sheriff in 1989 when the earthquake hit, and I can confidently say that the city is much better prepared today than we were in 1989. We've done thousands of hours of training, hundreds of individual exercises, and I think a greater level of understanding about how all the departments rely on each other. I know that prior to 1989, the work relationship between the San Francisco Sheriff's Department and the San Francisco Police Department was very separate. We had very little operational interaction. In 1989, during that earthquake, we had to bond, we had to share resources, and ever since then, we've worked much more closely together on a whole variety of different types of operations. In 1989, the Emergency Operations Center was barely existent at all, and the building that was there was damaged during the earthquake. Mayor Agnos had no place to meet with his department heads, and so we met in a ballpark in the corner of off of Goff. The department heads would sit in the stadium ballpark, and Mayor Agnos was standing basically at home plate talking to us and getting reports, and that situation would not arise today. But I think the thing that we have to keep reminding ourselves is that we don't know what the shape of the next disaster will be. We don't know if it will be Loma Prieta. We don't know if it'll be San Andreas and strike more in the southern and western side of the city. We don't know if there will be fires that have as great an impact as the earthquake itself. I know that as we looked at the 1906 earthquake commemoration, I did some research on what happened with the Sheriff's Department at that time. And the Sheriff's Department had a jail on Broadway and had prisoners housed in the Hall of Justice, then on Kearny. Both of those buildings survived the earthquake. Neither one survived the fire over the course of the next 2 days. They both were burned out and damaged from the fire far more than they were damaged from the earthquake itself. So I think we have to understand that we have to be prepared for all contingencies. The other thing I think we have to understand is that as time goes by, our relationships, our nuclear family, our official family changes. As Vicki pointed out, I'm one of the few department heads who was a department head in 1989, and there's been incredible turnover. In 1989, my 3-year-old daughter was playing with friends in Glen Park, running across the grass, and all of a sudden fell down and couldn't understand why she fell down. It seemed like the earth wasn't where her feet were supposed to go. Today, my 23-year-old daughter has her own apartment. She's not in my household. I have to make sure that she understands that she has household obligations of herself. She has to know where the gas valve is, not just me in my household. And I think those are the types of things that while we seem to be constantly repeating the same message, it's because circumstances change and because the inevitability of what the disaster will be is completely unknown. The other thing I'd like to say is that even though the city and county of San Francisco and its departments are better trained and better prepared than they've ever been, government cannot do everything. And I know that's been said here this morning, but individual citizens have to be prepared and have to understand that they have to take responsibility for themselves, and their families before the government can really be of assistance to them. And the work that our Department of Emergency Management has done in trying to convey this to people is really admirable, but we've got to continue to bring that message to people. I'm not sure what the statistics are, but new people move to San Francisco every year. They weren't here in 1989. They weren't here in 1999. And they've come here for either visiting purposes or to live, and are not tuned in yet to some of the history and some of the things that we've experienced. And so while it does seem like we are sometimes a broken record talking about people having to be responsible for themselves and their families, it's partly because the players change, new people come here, and we want them to be safe as well. So I'm very happy to be part of the city team on this and to work together with the other departments. And as I say, we are better prepared, but we can't let down our guard. We've got to continue to prepare ourselves better and to continue to remind citizens that they must be prepared as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Hennessy. Thank you, Secretary Bettenhausen, Deputy Director Karen Arms. I wanted to recognize a few people who are here today, some valued guests in our audience. I want to start with Harold Brooks, the Director of the American Red Cross, or the CEO of the Bay Area region of the American Red Cross. Is that correct, Harold? Yes, good. Thank you. Harold does so much for all of us. I also wanted to recognize Admiral Bidoff, who still works for the City and County of San Francisco, but was a great partner in 1989 as the Admiral in charge of Treasure Island at the time. And he's a great supporter of the Department of Emergency Management. And then we have retired Fire Chief Fred Postel, who was the fire chief in 1989. So thank you all for coming here today. I want to talk a little bit more about the Big Rumble, because the Big Rumble is one of the reasons we're here today. And the Big Rumble is meant to be a community event, but it has a number of events that are interrelated in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake. The incentive for the Big Rumble came from Peter Nantel, and I want to introduce Peter. Peter, will you raise your hand over there? Peter Nantel brought the idea to the Department of Public Health, the City Administrator's Office, and the Department of Emergency Management. Peter works for Committed to Community, a nonprofit who has donated a number of hours and time and money to this event. And I want to once again thank Peter for this. So the Big Rumble started with an idea, and we got together and we decided, what can we do to get community preparedness to spring from the community? What can we do to use social networking? What can we do to get people to make preparedness a normal part of their everyday lives? And one of the things that we thought is we want to do some events in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of Loma Prieta, use that as a catalyst. And so our first event will be on October 13th, and that'll be a panel discussion and reception to talk about what we have done since 1989 to make the city and county a better place. And I think it will have some interactive devices. We will ask people to come and tell their stories about 1989 on video and tell their stories about how they're better prepared today on video. And we'll be using that to post to YouTube and some other outlets. So that's one of those things that we're going to be doing on October 13th. On October 14th, Ed Lee, who's here, who's our city administrator, is convening the first Lifelines Council. And the Lifelines Council is intended to have the electrical supply people, PG&E obviously, and AT&T and others, and PUC come together to talk about restoration and eventual recovery in the event of a large event. So this is the start on the recovery process that, if you've been paying attention, we've been talking about for the last few disaster council meetings, and in the last year we've been building up to this. On October 15th, the Great California Shakeout, and I think Matt covered that very well. And San Francisco encourages everybody to go online. Pick your region, though, please. Put your region in as San Francisco so that we get credit for your participation, because that's how it works, okay? And then on the 17th, we have a series of neighborhood preparedness fairs. Some of the captains are here today, I think, and can the captains identify themselves? We've partnered with community captains. I see one here. Alexis is here from the Bayview Hunters Point. So we're having neighborhood preparedness fairs that are sponsored by the Big Rumble in 4 areas: the Bayview, the Sunset, the Marina, and the Mission. Thank you, thank you, Mayor. and we'll be doing that. But we're also asking people to go online and have their own neighborhood block parties and to map their blocks. And we've provided all the items for that. And finally, at the end of the 17th, at the Marina, because the Marina was the area of the city that was most impacted by the 1989 earthquake, we're going to be joining with the Marina Neighborhood Association, and Gail Goldine is here today, and she's putting together the Marina Memorial. And so we'll be working with her to have a commemoration, and at 5:04, the time of the earthquake, there'll be a commemoration event. So all those items are on a flyer that's on the table up there. I hope everybody will take one. I hope everybody will become a part of this. In the meantime, Mr. Mayor has done so much for preparedness. I was privileged to be at his first disaster council meeting the day you were sworn in, and since then I've been privileged to lead a few of those meetings. And we have at 23, we'll have 24 starting next month, will be our 24th disaster council meeting. And I think the mayor, more than anybody, has done more to inculcate preparedness into every department's day-to-day routine, and we need to keep that up, and we appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. In the spirit of that, we've heard somewhere that the mayor is expecting a package soon, and so a stork. And so what we've done, and I'm going to invite Rob Dudgeon. Rob Dudgeon, I want to introduce Rob. He's the deputy director. Him and his team in emergency management have done so much to help get this done. So we've prepared a little presentation for the mayor, and this is a package that includes items with which to get started to be prepared for the new edition. So we have a blanket, a swaddle blanket.
Yes, thank you.
We have bottles, just in case.
Excellent.
We have chlorine-free diapers.
Well done. That's good.
We have liquid formula, and it has a pop top, because one of the things, if you have a preparedness item and you use cans, a manual can opener.
What's this? Oh, those little things.
Pacifiers. They're called pacifiers.
Yeah. Okay. I won't say what I'm thinking.
No, you might want to give them to somebody else.
That's what I was
Huggies.
Thinking. Very cute. What's that?
And finally, Mr. Mayor, let me hold this up.
Oh, that's cute.
This is a onesie. Now, I want to show you the other side. We have the Big Rumble on the back here.
Very cute.
We want to make sure you and your family are ready.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You can put all
right.
your hand back up in here.
A real emergency kit.
And do you want to make closing remarks?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you very much. And again, I want to thank everybody for all of their hard work to get us to this point. And I cannot impress upon folks more the importance of being disaster prepared. It is remarkable to me, and it remains remarkable, and I can only imagine the frustration, particularly for leadership that was here in 1989. For all the progress we make, I imagine you still can't believe certain things that we haven't done, having lived through that experience in 1989. And we are remarkable creatures that tend to react most appropriately to crisis, but we tend to find creeping mediocrity when days become weeks and weeks become months and months become years, and we forget, and it will be at our peril that we are not prepared. This is serious business. It is, I think, appropriate that it was stated, Matt, I think you said it right. It's our obligation, it's our responsibility for the privilege of living out here to be prepared. It is incumbent upon us to take that responsibility seriously at our own peril. I think that we have made, as we have noted, a lot of progress, but we recognize we need to do a lot more, and we're not going to just rest on these laurels. And this is an opportunity, as was the 1906 commemoration, an opportunity to raise the bar and raise awareness. And I want to encourage people to go on our Twitter to go on our Facebook sites, to use YouTube, social media. Has been a big friend to these efforts and will advance these partnerships. Check out the 72hour.org website if you haven't done it. Learn more about how you can volunteer at the American Red Cross and donate to the American Red Cross. And please take the time to participate in these community events coming up. Thank you all very much for coming out. Thank you for this.
Doralice, o bem que lhe disse, amar a tolice é bobagem.